I said, where are you from? She
I
said,
got-
"Oh, right there."
I got a lot of vacation at the end of the year, so
Well, I'll tell you
I'm
one thing.
winding down
Y'all got
quickly,
some of the
yes.
most beautiful schools
I
I've
don't know
ever seen
what
in my
happened
life.
this year,
I said,
just
y'all
didn't
got
take
big football
vacations, and all this
fields,
vacation.
baseball fields,
I got
stadiums, everything.
your
That's
stories
beautiful.
on the
Buildings are beautiful.
rotunda for
He said,
Thanksgiving
well,
week
there's one thing
sometime.
about it. In
Oh,
Texas,
okay,
we
thanks.
So
spend
you're on there.
50% of the tax money on education.
I do, before Christmas and before Thanksgiving and before I go on vacation, I always hold back stuff. So there's stuff for the downtime.
Okay, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Got a lot on not so much the agenda here as we do, around the area today, but, welcome each one of you here. I want to welcome, the newspaper, Wade Littleton, Citizens Tribune, and Jeff Bobo with Kingsport Times News. I appreciate their support and help. We've got Don Hurst, with the, Tennessee State ECD, and Kenny Smith with, the University of Tennessee, and we got Nancy Barker representing the Chamber and I guess County Commission too today, so, and Ronnie with Networks, we'll hear from Ronnie here in a few minutes. Did everybody get a copy of the minutes of the last meeting? October 22nd minutes, did I hear a motion that, these be approved as mail, or?
So moved.
Any corrections? Got a motion and a second, all in favor say aye. All in favor say aye, no objections, so, minutes are approved. Rebecca, you've got a copy of the financial reports in each director's, packet, so if you would go over that.
Beginning balance October the 22nd, $14,658.29. We had 3 deposits, one from the state of Tennessee for our site development grant reimbursement at $33,589.80. $1.07 for entrance for October, and then if you'll notice the $375 deposit, we had one of our board members that was going to go to the governor's conference, but at the last minute could not go, so the Hawkins County mayor used that registration, and then they reimbursed us for that, so we wouldn't lose the money on it. And so, one check to Mattern and Craig for due diligence that was reimbursed by the state for $33,589.80.
I'm gonna get on this side for a change.
Gave us a balance in checking of $15,034.36. One CD at Civis Bank, $6,170.96, and one reimbursement due from Rita at $536.
Do I have any questions concerning the financial reports for, the month? Hearing none, I hear a motion that we accept these for our records. I've got a motion and a second, all in favor say aye. Any opposed, so moved. Okay, I do wanna let you know that, Bill Lyons is not here today because he's attending an RPO meeting, with the, TDOT group and, I guess the development district that puts these on. And Calvin Clifton is also, that represents Mattern and Craig, also represents Hawkins County on that particular board. And so we put a special emphasis, on them attending this meeting because this sets the itinerary and the items that are gonna be funded for the 2019-2020 year. And we had a meeting, I guess last week, of the Joint Economic Development Group for Hawkins County, and this item was on the agenda that we discussed. And so, we want to make sure that they are there, and hopefully, I guess the mayor's invited, the county mayor's invited, and the road
Commissioner.
road
I talked to
commissioner.
Lowell this morning, we think he went.
I think he went too, so that's great, that we can get them up there and hopefully get the projects that we're most interested in funded through the state. One in particular is the main road right down the middle of Phipps Bend Industrial Park, and that's the one that we're, I guess, interested in. We understand that the bridge and the road, the bridge is gonna be funded for sure on AFG Road. The road, we understand that Laurel has that in his budget to pave and shore it up, you know, we've had the issues up there before. And so, that's part, I think, of the industrial board's mission is to make sure, not only recruiting industry and helping industry expand and things, but making sure that the infrastructure that is provided by government is taken care of. And so this all goes along with what I perceive as being our duty, to make everyone aware of it, help them get the funding and whatever to do that. So that's all going on today as we speak. Rebecca mentioned in the financial report about the due diligence report, and this is the report. It's already been brought to your all's attention that matters and they now have been reimbursed for all of that. The next portion of that, out of the due diligence, one of the big issues, the main issues we found was certain areas in the almost 100-acre site that they're doing the due diligence on was some areas of concern about possibly Indian grounds, and other areas of concern in that 100-acre site. And TVA was good enough through Tim Tidwell to
Okay.
forgive me, this I thought I had that thing turned off, but obviously I did not, and I'm still not sure I got that turned off. Anyway, there was a mountain of information. As you can imagine, when TVA was going to build a nuclear plant there at Phipps Bend, they did extensive research, archaeological and otherwise, and all that data is out there. It's just a matter of then putting it together, analyzing it, and going through it. And so the Phipps Bend joint venture at our meeting, along with the executive board of this board, had a meeting, was that last week?
Yes.
Last week, to discuss that particular issue and to act on it. And one of the action was that there was a group that Mattern and Craig had ascertained to go through all those records and try to figure out what part related to the 100-acre site and what, if anything, needs to be done. And so they're in the process of doing that now. We authorized a review of that, and I'm not sure exactly, $3,500, and I signed the document today authorizing that.
Paid by Phipps Bend.
Paid for by the Phipps Bend joint venture. And so this will give, you know, they'll spend about 45 days going over that and then get back with both groups to let us know what they find. I'm not exactly sure what we expect out of this, to tell you the truth, but it's something that has to be done because now that it's been made aware of, you just can't sell it to somebody and them expect to come in. So we'll get that out of the way for us all, and we'll know kind of which direction to go as soon as we get that back. Another area of great concern, in this report, was the finding of some wetlands. And if you have designated wetlands, that's a real issue, and from my understanding, the Corps of Engineers and them have determined that there are some wetlands. It may be, and this is another thing that we're gonna have to do some, study on, is do we redraw and eliminate those? Cause some of them were in the, perimeter areas, and so we're gonna try to deal with that. But some of them are in the center of the area, because you've got the you know, one of the big main items we wanted to do was eliminate the big swell that was man-made. So if you had a nuclear meltdown or whatever, that water would flow down that swell into the holding ponds. Well, some of that area now has, because of the natural drainage, you've got some cattails and stuff. And those areas will probably have to be mitigated, which means that you designate another area and you offset that particular wetlands with some additional wetlands that you've produced. So I guess that was two of the main items that came to light out of this due diligence report that really was concerning to us. One thing that I would mention from that, we had them look at the rail sites, the rail spur expansions that were available to us there. If you had if you designated this 100 acres and you have a client that comes in and says that he would like to have, they'd like to have this property, but they need rail. So they actually reviewed it, they met with Norfolk Southern, and they came up with 4 different avenues to run rail in. So if that issue comes up, then we can say, okay, here's the study we've had done on this, here's what it's gonna cost, and we know kind of what we're dealing with as far as that goes. Another issue that came up during this that we wanted them to look at was the movement of the original sewer line that kind of ran through the center of the property, and the cost of that, we felt like if you had a good client and everything, it would be better to wait and see if that is an issue rather than just arbitrarily say, okay, let's just move the line and we can market it as a full 100-acre site. Right now, it's basically 2 50-acre sites with a sewer line running down the middle of it. If you had somebody that wanted 100 acres, we know what the cost is gonna be, to, you know, in today's dollars, to move that sewer line through the perimeters. Was there other items that major?
Valving the main water lines.
That was not part of
That's
this.
not part of these.
Okay,
Now,
okay.
that was, is on that's on the water tank and the repair of the lines and the valving and all that. Hopefully, now that's going to the utility district's business, more so than it is ours.
That's a big issue.
It's a big issue. We hope that we got them grant money, we got them a loan, we helped them access a loan, let me say it that way. Now, the ball's in their court now as to how
They're actually having a meeting tomorrow. on this.
Tomorrow. Good, to decide how to go about doing it.
I think
And
so.
the U.S. Department of Agriculture, when we introduced them to the situation up there, came in with a zero loan program, zero interest loan program, or a very low interest loan program for them to access. But we also were able to get them some Appalachian Regional Commission monies grant money. So hopefully we can get that situation resolved in the
The only
near
other
future.
thing I can think of in the report is the cooling tower. If they could actually destroy the cooling tower.
And they actually came up with a dollar amount on what it would cost to tear it down and remove it. So if that ever, you know, they covered about everything on that side of the park, in this report. And so we now have that at our disposal in case that ever comes up. You can say, okay, well, if you want all that down through there, you know, that kinda opens up an additional 40 acres that's to the south of the cooling tower. We know now what it costs to remove the cooling
But
tower
it's not in
base.
the 100 acres. The
Huh?
cooling tower's not in the 100 acres, right?
No,
Okay.
but it's right on the perimeter, and it would open up an additional acreage. The only other thing, and we discussed this with TVA, are the grounding mats that are in that area, that are not part of the 100 acres, but if you're dealing with the cooling tower, then you gotta deal with the grounding mats that are there, so. We feel like, you know, in the grant money that we got to do the $100,000 study, we think we covered everything that we could think of on this deal. So we're very pleased with the report, but it did bring to all of our attention, including the state and TVA, that there are more issues than we had realized. And so rather than going ahead and immediately filing for funds from TVA and the state, we decided to kind of back off on this thing and wait and see till we get further information on this archaeological information that TVA has provided, and then I guess we'll meet again and, you know, keep kicking this can down the road till we get some resolution on it as to, and some direction for us to bring to your all's attention to act on. So those are the two big major issues, the one that Terry brought up about the water tank and the water lines. We feel like we've done all we can do now. It's in the hands of the board at Sigourney Utility District, and I think they appreciated the effort that we put forth in helping them get that.
Well, they couldn't stand another shutdown like we had when the water broke, cause, you know, it cost a lot of money.
Cost a lot of money and a lot
They had to
of,
send people home, everything.
yeah. So hopefully we're doing all we can do.
I know.
It's, and like I say, I think, the report, you know, highlighted several issues that we still got with a large site. If we're able to eventually get this site, all the issues resolved and everything, you're gonna have the largest flat site in northeast Tennessee by far, with accessibility to enormous amounts of power, all the utilities there, and with rail. So I think we can, you know, we can go after whatever we choose to try to encourage to come in, so. Does anybody else have any questions or anything on that? Like I say, we've gone over part of that at the last meeting, but I think we've pretty much covered everything that I'm aware of.
You said there was a meeting tomorrow to further discuss the water situation?
Yeah, I'm not involved in it, but yes, yes.
As part of the old business, some of you recall the 7-acre site that we purchased that was formerly Kingsport Packaging, that had the mysterious fire and all of that. Took us 10 years before it came out of the court system, and they put it on as a tax sale, and we bought that property back, if you recall. And we purchase that piece of property. We had
One still had the slabs
Yeah.
remaining on it?
Yeah, yeah. And we, if you recall, there was a lot of cleanup that needed to be done, and we did a good job of cleaning that up. There were several barrels there on the property. And when we did a phase one environmental, which includes, you know, various and sundry things, but one of those is, if you had any underground storage or overhead storage of anything that could contaminate the site, you need to be aware of it, you know, and, so we did the phase one environmental, and there's a copy of that. Well, one of the things that came to our attention when I read through that one evening at home, even though this is an old issue, one of the things that they recommended is that the purchaser of the property, there were 14 55-gallon drums observed on the property. We properly disposed of those with the help of the hazmat group here in Hawkins County and everything. But some of the drums were unlabeled, but most of them were alcohol-related stuff for cleaning. You know, they were a printing and binding company, and so not a real, you know, a lot of heavy-duty stuff, but still. But one of the observations made by Foundation Systems Engineering was that we have the site soil board. We never had done that, and so to make that site available for sale before we can do anything and get this site cleared for sale is we need to have some borings done. And that was another item on the meeting last week. The Phipps Bend Joint Venture agreed to have the soil boring test done. And so since they did the original phase one, we asked them to do the soil boring test. And so we authorized that today.
What was the cost?
$3,805.
$3,805.
It's the 7 acres we're talking about?
Right,
Yeah.
but it was just, they know, they got all the pictures and everything, they know exactly where the 14 barrels were stored.
Yeah.
And so they will bore through the concrete and around the side where it was at, to make sure that we get a clean bill of health on that particular piece of property. So, any questions or anything about that?
That'll probably take several weeks to process all that.
45 days, isn't
Was
it?
that all?
Was it,
No,
what was it, 45 days?
I don't know, but it was 3 weeks.
Okay.
Oh, 3 weeks, okay. 45 days on, oh, to review the documents that he.
Oh, okay.
Dealing with too many issues here today, so, anyway, it's 45 days to get back with us on, and how they're gonna review the literally thousands of documents that TVA had on that archaeological site. Was 45 days, this was 3 weeks. So hopefully at the end of 3 weeks, we'll know what we got on that. Any other old business anybody can think of? On new business, we've got 2 board members that terms end December the 31st of this year. And it's our recommendation, that we ask the, county commission to reappoint, Gene Christian and Otis Muncy to another term on the industrial board, so. We've talked with both these individuals, both of them agree to serve, and both of them bring a lot of history and a lot of knowledge to the board, and so, that would be our recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
That's so moved.
We got a motion, we got a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? We will pass that on to the county commission. Rebecca, you wanna talk to them about, your program of work for,
I passed out a copy of the 2019 program of work to everybody. This is something that, first of all, is required for certain grants that I apply for. So it is a requirement, but it is also good just to have, the industrial board to have. I asked that we're not gonna do anything on it today, but I just handed it out for you to look over and give me any ideas or any changes or anything that you'd like to have made possibly for our January meeting, to have that approved for the January meeting. So it would be the 2020 program of work in January. So if you,
I think it'd be good, for each of you to look this over. In addition, you know, we've got in the minutes and everything, all the different activities that do go on, and I think people sometimes don't recall exactly all the meetings and things that are attended on behalf of this board. It's unbelievable. We're meeting every week with somebody, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, so.
2 or 3 times a day.
And sometimes 2 or 3 meetings in the same day. I know was it yesterday? What day did Tuesday, I had, my wife had a doctor's appointment. She had a meeting with, what was that?
It was the RIM meeting, their annual meeting.
The Regional Industrial Development Association meeting, where they discussed what their activities are, and, we'll ask Ronnie, to expand on that maybe a little bit in his talk about, the regionalism that's going on, with all the talks. If you watched Channel 11 last night, they had about an hour, report, bringing in the county executives from Sullivan County and Washington County, and then they brought in the, Clay Walker with Networks and Mitch Miller with NetRep, whatever it is, from Washington County, and they discussed it. Then, interestingly enough, they brought Bill Green in at the end, and he was kinda.
He's sweet as ever, isn't he?
He's a sweet fella. But it's interesting, you know, he kinda threw cold water on a lot of what was going on. I don't think there's any doubt that a regional effort is good. The problem is, and like, as Bill Green brought out, they dealt with 2 counties, basically Washington County and Sullivan County. They left out Hawkins and Greene, Unicoi, Carter, all of Southwest Virginia group. Bristol, left Bristol out, so, you know, you true regionalism, but the players want to be who the players are, and, it's gonna be interesting to see how all this, shakes out.
We've seen a few of them over the years, haven't we?
We have, interestingly enough, Ronnie and I were involved, and I guess it's been that long, when we had some of the same players were talking about we need to be of one mind here in Northeast Tennessee, and create this regional industrial, economic group. And I remember they asked me, I was president of the then Northeast Tennessee Regional Industrial Development Association, and so I met with the group at the airport, and I advised them at that time there was already an effort to do that, and a lot of money being expended in that area, but they knew more about it than I did, and so they went forward, and collected about $5 million, if my memory serves me correctly. And they hired a fellow out of North Carolina by the name of Andy Burke, and hired a full staff and spent $5 million in a short period of time, and then dissolved. And nobody even remembers that except those of us that were involved. Got absolutely nothing out of it that I could see. Absolutely nothing. So I hope we're not heading in that same direction, but it certainly looks as if they're leaving all the parameters, areas, and moving toward that same thing. Trying to rename the system or the area, and maybe it needs renaming. I don't know. There's a lot of tri-cities in the United States, and we're the only one that does have an airport and listed as tri-cities, TRI, if you fly a lot, and I do see a little bit of joint effort with, like at the Aerospace Park, and you do see some regionalism coming. But even as far as that goes, I would think you would want to include Hawkins County, who is right on the border of Washington County and Sullivan County. And, but nobody's called, so. Anyway, I don't know, Ronnie, where are we at on, I mean, is there anything we need to be doing? You know, we use networks and they do a great job for us. And we certainly don't wanna lose that in this process.
I don't think that'll happen. What's being talked about now, and it's no secret, is networks and NetRep. NetRep is Washington, Carter, and Unicoi counties. That's who they represent, and Networks represents Sullivan and the city, of course, Kingsport, Bristol, and then Hawkins County. They're looking at ways that they can collaborate better and maybe divide the functions up that each one of them does. Like Don just heard all this. If I missed something, he can help me too. Like NetRep, they do a great job with promoting the outdoor activities, Meet the Mountains, recruiting new talent into the area, things like that, a lot of events and everything. And Networks, basically, its core thing has always been traditional economic development, which is what the contract with Hawkins County is with them. So the boards are talking, and I know Clay Walker and Mitch Miller, the two CEOs, they've been meeting on a regular basis, and I don't know what the end result will be, but I assume that once they decide what they're going to do, then it obviously would have to be some kind of agreement reached with Hawkins County to stay in it or whatever it would be. I don't know. But it's taking up a lot of time and energy from a lot of people right now. And so I know they're meeting today on some issues on it there. And then, but we meeting the Networks Board and the NetRep Board actually signed a memorandum of agreement. That we joked and said it means we're all gonna play nice together. And there's always been this misconception out there that we always fought each other for projects and did all this and that, and you know that wasn't true. We all worked together on projects, and you're selling Hawkins County, you have to sell the whole region.
Right.
I mean, cause you're gonna try to bring in the fact that ETSU's there, Northeast State's there, the workforce is there, the airport's there and everything. Then everything that's submitted from, Sullivan County, like the fifth bid, it's got all that in it, and everything that we submit, like for a site in Bristol, it's gonna have all the Johnson City demographics in it also. And see, a few years ago, they split the metropolitan area, statistical area, up into two different ones. Instead, it used to be just one SMA, which the Tips Bend East and Hawkins County is a part of.
Right.
So there's some people looking at maybe, do we need to go back to that? So there's a lot of things out there, I have no idea what the end result will be. I know that Clay spends a lot of time on it right now.
Right.
And, but as far as activity, I think at Donte, it's kind of slowed down to some extent, and, there's not as many RFIs being sent out for response from the communities. And with the climate in Washington and election year coming up, you know, historically, those kind of slowed down to some extent. So what we've been focusing on, I have, is just going out and visiting with existing industries, and the end result of that was we had an event on, November 1st, had the Commissioner of Labor Workforce Development, Jeff McCord, who's from Kingsport,
Right.
and then we invited Sullivan County Industries, Rebecca Sinnott with Hawkins County, and we included the, Sullivan and Washington and Carter and Unicoi counties, and we had representatives, several industries from all 5 counties there. He kinda gave an update on, what the next year looks like from the administration, and they're gonna put a big emphasis on recovery, people coming back in the workforce, try to keep them from not returning to prison. There's a big push gonna be on apprenticeships. They're gonna have they've got a staff person hired that's gonna go out and just meet with the companies that are interested in these apprenticeships. And the other part of our meeting that day was we had Ballad Health there, and they're with their recovery groups. Because the other way to get some workers is people recovering from, you know, opioid addictions and whatever, and that seemed to be a way that some people can look at trying to find new workers. As you know, everybody's looking for workers right now, and finding them is not very easy, and the turnover rates are higher than they need to be. And of course, you know, the unemployment rate is as low as it is. It's not just here, it's a nationwide thing. But that's kind of some of the things that the state of Tennessee is gonna try to do, is help get these people back in the workforce and not return back to prison, because as you know, that costs a lot of money to house a prisoner. And somebody can go back and enjoy a productive life, that's win-win for everybody. So I think you're gonna hear more about those things as you go forward. But the one word that, I guess, to sum up what's going on with that regionalism, it's taking a lot of time, and a lot of meetings with our board and different people. I have no idea how the end result will be.
I don't either. It's gonna be, interesting to keep up with, because like I say, some of us have been around maybe too long, that remembers, historically what actually occurred. On the same line, you talk about hiring people, Cooper Standard, I think, is announced they're gonna be hiring 25 new employees directly into the factory, and so, and I know Rebecca, who's chairman of the,
Hawkins
I
County
keep wanting-
Professional Association.
right, I keep, want to call the Human Resources People Personnel Association, but, they had a meeting here last week, and, that's always an issue, and I think what's gonna happen, and which is a good thing for the, working public, is that you're gonna see wages going up, to get and retain good employees, so that's a good thing.
Cooper Standard's also gonna be hosting 2 job fairs to try and recruit these new employees.
That's great. You've also got a calendar of next year's meetings in your packet, that we prepared to try to get ready for another new year. And we've got a Christmas, get-together on December the 10th, so there won't be a full functioning meeting. We'll take anything up at that time if we need to. And you need to get your menu back into Rebecca so she doesn't have to call everybody.
Or I give you what y'all want you to have.
Your bologna sandwich will fit in nicely with your response. And like I say, look over that program of work, and she'll be preparing a new one for 2020 to be discussed at our January meeting.
Do you have any new suggestions for objectives or anything like that? Just give me a call or email me or.
If we, I know you all have met since we had our governor's conference, I guess, and we went over that, but we went down, had a good meeting with everybody, and so, we're anxious to see the new governor's agenda and how he's approaching things, and I agree with it that more emphasis needs to be on technical and things of that nature than on college educations, and we've got a trade school. I was just up there this week, and they got a full classes. It's just unbelievable, the kids or young people that attend TCAT, and so.
They got that grant too, the governor's, what's it called? Stands for the
Initiative on
Industrial Initiative on Vocational Education, and the TCAT Morristown applied and got $1 million.
Right.
Which was part of it be spent up here, and I think Northeast State was awarded, and then the TCAT in Elizabeth, there were 3 awarded in this area.
Oh,
There was
okay.
25 million.
That's all 3 of them.
Yeah, that's 25 million across the state,
Oh, okay.
and it's for that, the vocational education initiatives.
Those sure do.
So, that's great. If, in 1991, how many years ago has that been?
Long time.
Long time.
Our illustrious Rebecca was chosen as Ramey in Who's Who. She was chosen as at Cherokee High School, selected for Who's Who among American high school students, and somebody
Found that. And brought it to me.
found a Rogersville review, and she's on the front page. So lovely young high school student.
Haven't changed a bit,
But I saw that lead on her desk, and I told her, I said, they're gonna have to see that. Does anyone else have anything, Don, anybody, Kenny, anything you all need to make us aware of?
I don't know if you know that, KS Park is semi-retiring, leaving St. Bond. End of this month will be his last day there, so
Oh, okay.
they're gonna, I just left there, and, he said they haven't named a replacement yet. The head, one of the head plant managers from Korea is gonna kinda come back and forth for a while, but,
Okay.
that's the only news I know of.
Well,
Is he like the plant manager?
He's the general manager there, yes. Long time, yeah, he's gonna stay in the area, stay in Johnson City, his kids are in school here, and likes it, but, nice fellow, I hate to see him leave there.
Don, do you have anything,
Well, the only thing I would add, and I think you and Ronnie have both touched on it, but, you know, going back to the governor's conference, you really had 5 initiatives, but the one that we're trying to focus on, especially in Northeast Tennessee, is, you know, taking advantage of some of the site development grants, which you all have done and hopefully will continue to do. We're just in the market, if you don't have a product, you're not gonna make a sale, so we will make sure we keep investing in land and infrastructure and transportation, the things that get prospects here to look and make deals and create better jobs and more of them. So that's kind of our focus going forward as well.
well, I'm kinda like Ronnie, I've seen, a decline in the number of, folks out there looking right now, but we run into this, when you hit the holiday season, I mean, you know, people just quit looking, and, so hopefully, first of the year, things will pick back up, and
We're still out there, in fact, Michael submitted one today, so
I did it,
we're still responding.
Yes.
Maybe not as many, but there's still,
there's still a
Only takes
few
one
at
time.
well, that's right, it's just that one, like somebody told me about the
That's why
lottery.
Michael was with us today, he was finishing that up.
Oh, okay. If you don't play the lottery, you don't really have a chance of winning, but, you gotta be in the game. I ain't seen anything, go
I
ahead.
hadn't heard an update on Tony's Birchfield, their expansion. Is there any news on that or any update on that?
We're working on it.
Okay.
We're about to finalize it. Anybody, you have anything for?
No, we're just gearing up for Christmas.
Ready for Christmas
Five
parade?
hundred, making five parades.
Christmas gear, ain't
Yeah,
it?
Christmas gear. So, retail tells us that they're doing good so far this year, so it's picked up, so.
The economy is doing well, you know, if you keep up with the stock market, you know, it's breaking records every day, seems like. It went down a little bit yesterday, but the economy's in high gear. Hope it continues on, even with all the things that are going on in Washington. It seems to be, the business people and the industries keep doing their thing, so. All right, since Otis is out of pocket, somebody on that other end of the table is going to have to take his place to adjourn this august body.
I say we adjourn, I guess.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
When you talked about the site preparation, we had that discussion earlier in the meeting, and because of the archaeological study
And he found
and
that and
the,
brought it into me, Lord mercy.
what was the other one? Archaeological study
That's about
and the cost of the moving the wetlands.
ago.
You said you need to hold off. What are you actually holding off on?
Well, one of the things that we had discussed as a group was, and it's been more than approved, and we got the grant money, $100,000 to do the study.
Well, you know,
They want,
I'll be 46
but what they
next
wanted in the end run is they
And
wanted,
I still
to
think-
fill in
as me
the
at that
slide.
Right.
Fill it
My
in.
mental, and I still think of my
Grade
mom and
off
dad,
property up here. fill
that's
it
my
up.
age now, you know.
Actually move the sewer line.
And on top of that, give me 49.
And at the same time, they wanted
The ground plates, grounding?
grounded mats.
No, that's not it. Okay.
No,
Now, you know, there's a, how long ago was that? Been a long time.
when we authorized this, one of them was the building
Those was, those was right.
That's a too big.
Yes.
And then the removal of the cooling tower was kind of third.
Well, that,
That was just kind of an
we
extra.
wanted to throw that in on the side.
Okay.
Basically, all they had to do was get somebody down there and say, well, it's this much, it's this much stuff. What's it gonna take to knock it down and haul it out?
Right.
And so they did that. The other one, which was a big item, was the rail to the side. Because you know where it stops there as you come in. And the rail spur really needs to be redone all the way back to, I guess, the original rail, I mean, the rail line, not the spur, you know, you got a spur that comes off that goes to, it's Aladdin on his homeland line, they got their own spur, and then we got a spur. We and try to maintain, not having been used in years, but we wanted to see what it would cost, and if that's the best way to get into this particular piece of property. If somebody says, we just got to have rail, and so now we know, they've got four different looks at it, from, you know, coming in, on the east end, you know, how you get through this, the property without, so, you know, we and so now we know that.
Okay, so pending the completion of the archaeological study and the wetland study, you're gonna hold off on what, applying for grant funds?
I think so.
Okay.
That was pretty much the consensus, is that it was gonna be so expensive. What started out to be basically a $3 million project with pretty much the guarantee that we would get the funds in to do that, is now turned into $5 million.
Oh, boy.
And everybody said, well, wait a minute, we're gonna get this piece of property so expensive, it's gonna be what we do know now is what it's gonna cost to do various scenarios, and so when we do market it, and they say, well, we don't want it because it's gonna be sort of, well, we know what it's going, $500 or $600 million, we'll remove that and move it over here.
In other words, don't do that until you need to.
Till we need to,
Okay.
and now we know what it's gonna cost.
Do you really?
Kind of like the spec building, don't build a spec building until you know you got a buyer. Yeah, well, 10 years, it took 10 years, it was worth it out in the long run probably. But 10 agonizing years. But how much is the moving of the sewer, how much would that cost? Oh Lordy, I don't want you to have to look through that giant book.
Well, you look on the summary page.
What you need, Larry?
To move the sewer line.
How much?
And then how much to move the cooling tower, just out of curiosity? You'd think somebody come in just to get the steel. That steel's gotta be worth some money.
We had it for him anyway.
Just short of
I think we called him.
For 40 acres. To clear up 40 acres.
It's no big deal.
Okay.
Well, I started mentioning it.
So, when you say it went from a $3 million to a $5 million, was the additional cost like the mitigation of the wetlands?
we don't even know what that's going to cost. To fill in the area down there, there's about $1 million.
Okay.
And that's
I've worked at that before.
you know, give us the heartburn, like, but then when we found out there were some wetlands that have to be mitigated, then you don't know what you do.
Yeah.
And so,
Okay.
we're gonna do a little more, as you say, the studies on the wetlands and the areas in question about archaeological issues. We just don't know. I mean, that stuff was done. You know, at the end of the river, I'm sure that the Indians and Native Americans
But I can send you last
frequented
year's
that area.
Yeah.
summary if you need to. Okay.
Hunting grounds, great fishing.
I give that out, and it's, you know, it's just kind of a summary of everything that's happened here. Everything that we've done, our industry.
But at least you don't have to send in the archaeologists, you just gotta go look at the paperwork.
TVA has done that 40 years ago, so that's just a matter of reviewing their findings.
40 years, you gotta go back through their boxes in the warehouse.
They found it all, and were very, but we don't have the personnel to do it, so
Thank
we're
you.
gonna.
You can be able to come to our presentation.
Yes, and I need to bring my thing with me.
Okay, yeah. That's fine. Okay,
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Something like that for a company to sit down and review and give us at least
She's not a certified public.
some idea about,
But
you
you
know,
gotta
what
always
we're
think,
doing.
and they-
Okay. All right. So as far as a timeline, how long do you think the archaeological study is going to
And
take?
then people think all that.
Do y'all know?
The archaeological study, how long was that? That wasn't 3 weeks, that was.
45 days.
45 days. Okay. So maybe sometime early next year you'll be able to update, know a little bit more about what's
One
going
of the
on.
things that, some of the money that's available, you have to apply for the grant in February 2020. We wanted the report back prior to that,
So we would have time to apply
So
if we can.
Okay.
we'll have time to apply for some grant money in February if we get the report
Okay.
back. As they said they would in 45 days.
Do you think you might apply for grant money to do the projects like the sewer line and the filling in, even though you might not do it right away? Can you apply for the grant money and get it in place?
You can.
Okay.
You gotta do it, if you apply for it, you gotta do it.
Okay.
We had, I forgot.
All right.
I used to know how many parcels of land we had.
The iron horse, the mills.
Oh well, I just got somebody just left me a voicemail, so that's probably what that's about. Is there actual flames coming out of the building?
The picture I got just shows smoke.
Okay. Well, I'm headed that way, so